During the 1960s, Britain was told by the media at the time that we were on the brink of something terrible. The British public became more uncertain of their future than any other time in recent history. The reason? A standoff between the American West and the East of Europe, which glued people to their TV sets and their radios. What was the reason that ordinary people were looking at the skies in anticipation of scary objects that were being constantly mentioned on our TV sets? It was the Cold War, which is still talked about today. Was it total fear? Or was it that the public just got on with their lives and kept the same view as they did during the Second World War and just carried on regardless with that stiff, upper lip attitude? That is what we're going to talk about today. The view of the Cold War from the man and woman in the street, their view, without getting political. First of all, I'm going to simplify the whole thing. The Cold War was never an actual battle with armies marching into countries or bombs being dropped. It was a period of secrets, espionage, a battle to get to space first, an arms race to see who could build the most powerful weapons, which included the worst ones of all, nuclear weapons. It was an era of novels being written and documentaries being made about what could happen if global war actually did break out, which included films that described the disaster in gory detail and mentioned an all-out Third World nuclear war. It was on the tip of people's tongues, and the government wanted to warn people and attempt to teach British people how to keep safe with public information leaflets. How did this really affect British people of the United Kingdom? Well, we are going to find out. But first of all, let's understand in layman's terms what the Cold War was. And even though it was a battle of both secrets and public warnings between Russia and the USA, why was Britain so involved? Well, the UK joined NATO in 1949, which made us close allies to the USA, and the oath to defend Western Europe if it went under attack. It's as simple as that, so far, but it shaped Britain and its defence systems forever. Britain built an intelligence network with its allies, and it was the start of its special relationship with America. Britain, as we all know, was never attacked during this time, and it's important to say that the country's leaders stated that having nuclear weapons are more a deterrent than an attack strategy, which keeps us all safe. Britain did have such weapons based here and gave permission for the USA to place their powerful warheads on our land, and many people were not happy with that. The question is and will always remain, how close were we to a full-scale nuclear war? Well, I can't answer that with all my research, and I doubt that anyone really could. But as we will soon see, it was almost like countries were showing off their armoury as a deterrent, or maybe a status symbol. After all, they don't come cheap. So, in some ways, it was indirectly showing a nation's wealth and effect. The era of dropping bombs from planes had changed to missiles that could make their own way to their targets. But this was apparently mad, not in the medical sense, but in the way of deterrence known as mutually assured destruction. So it was theoretically ridiculous to start such a war that would destroy their own nations and devastate their world. After all, if you was to pour a glass of poison and give it to your friend and they knew, and they did the same to you and you knew, you wouldn't drink it, would you? Otherwise you'd both pop your clogs. Not the best analogy, but I hope you get what I mean. When asking the British public at this time what they thought of the tensions of the time, many had different views, but the most, as I said, just got on with their daily lives. However, some people's opinions did change when it was made public, in the headlines, that read, "The closest the world has come to nuclear war, or the war to end everything." This was when an ultimatum was given to Russia when the USA had discovered they had plonked nuclear missiles smack bang in the middle of Cuba in 1962, which was spotted from an air pilot in the sky, and he photographed it for evidence. Well, this rattled Kennedy, the president at the time, and he came up with a warning and a time limit to force these weapons to be removed. And on the 28th of October of that year, Russia agreed to remove their warheads, and America in return stepped back from their programs regarding weapons placements, amongst other concessions. Just keeping it simple. But during this time, the general public of Britain had never been so more interested in current affairs and politics, and definitely had a lot to say. Many news stories at the time pointed the cameras at ordinary folk for their opinions, and they were very keen to give them too. Some thought, well, it would only take somebody to push that button who's having a bad day, and we're all gone. But reassuringly, the operation is a lot more complex than that. Many wanted bombs to be banned, whilst others thought that we needed to protect ourselves in having weapons to put countries off attacking us. We had anti-war marches with people chaining themselves to fences and gates, while holding those infamous banners with a well-known CND sign, sometimes called Ban the Bomb. CND, Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. Their logic is, if everyone got rid of their weapons of mass destruction, surely the world would be a safer place. Would you agree? Well, people did. But this would have been a matter of trust, a matter of believing that every nation had got rid of all of those weapons of this type and had none left, not even secretly. The CND symbol had many interpretations, but most believed it was a man with opened arms, stretched out, empty-handed. It was created in 1958 by artist Gerald Holton, and it's actually a semaphore flag showing letters N and D. The demonstrations involved tens of thousands of people from all backgrounds who wanted Britain to get rid of its nuclear arms, believing that Britain having such weapons will be a target and therefore be a higher risk. The movement wanted to eradicate bombs in every country. Students, mothers with babies, teachers, doctors, people of the church were all marching, holding boards and banners with slogans such as Ban the Bomb, No More Hiroshima, and Peace, Not War. These marches went throughout towns all over Britain, and yet they were always peaceful. But Brits were divided in their opinion, particularly those who disagreed with the protests, and stated that if we hadn't got no weapons, we wouldn't be so powerful and would be attacked. Many newsreels featured the marches and the demonstrations, which made big news and encouraged even larger debates. Yet there were many that simply thought this type of devastating war would never happen. The Cold War would never become a hot war. It's definitely believed that many people did live in fear. But there was nothing publicly shared, you see, about it was never actually going to happen. Instead, Brits were being educated and exposed to the possible outcome with public information leaflets on how best to survive. The opinion again was divided, some saying, well, what's the point? Parliament, however, was trying to do two things at once, reassuring people that Britain was prepared for such an event, whilst trying to avoid panic amongst us. We were told if such an event occurred to save food, such as cans, dried food, and food with a long shelf life, save bottles of water, build a makeshift fallout shelter, make sure you had a radio with batteries to listen for announcements. Later, in the 1970s, TV adverts during the breaks would include broadcasts on the series Protect and Survive, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. This was a simple animated series of what to do in a nuclear attack. The narration was done by calming yet assertive voice and recognised actor Patrick Allen. the fella from Dahlem for murder? Called the 4-minute warning, this was the amount of time the Brits would have to get all these preparations ready. Would that have had any effect? Well, no one really knows, because luckily, they didn't need to. But with all this going on, the country did not stand still in fear. We went to work as normal. We went down the pub, took our holidays and raised our families. We did not sit indoors waiting for that warning. Like any feeling of fear in the body, it gets tired of being frightened and adapts to threat over time. And the more the subject was raised, the less shocking it seems to the public. According to psychologists, this reaction is very common. People get used to a certain level of fear and they stop feeling it. It happened during the Blitz in the Second World War. And that was when London was being actually bombed night after night. And there were people that did state, every night we're getting bombed. I'm either too numb to fear, or I'm just too exhausted to fear. Leaflets were distributed with the same message and guidance, but the actual films were held in reserve and only to be shown if a nuclear attack was imminent. You're wondering why you've perhaps seen one of these public information films, because I've seen them. Well, here's why. The leaflets and booklets became very interested to the media, and it got its teeth into it as to whether the actions that appeared in the publication would do any good such a nuclear attack ever happen. It was the government's idea at the time not to announce that we'd ever be victorious in such a war, but to keep Britain moving somehow and restore things over time. But debates were being held and campaigns, and they were saying the government was being too optimistic and not practical. Journalists somehow found the existence of these films and copped hold of them, and they were actually shown on news bulletins as part of their own documentaries and never broadcasted by the government. So, had the media have never got hold of them, would we have ever seen them? What about that? It's believed that the government wasn't hiding these films, they just thought that by showing them wasn't necessary, because they wanted to hold them back until they were necessary. Why scare the public of something that may never happen? But one of those information films was actually in the movie Threads, made in 1984, and that's up next. Threads is no doubt one of the most powerful films made by the BBC, directed by Mick Jackson. It got the nation talking. But it was deliberately made without well-known actors or stars, to make the film take an ordinary people approach, and was more of a historical documentation than a horror movie. Its realistic portrayal of everyday people, showing how rapidly life would change during and after a nuclear attack. The movie was less for entertainment, but more for awareness. And when we think about it, the film described many people's fears and turned them into reality, which made it so much more believable and powerful, and not to mention, many had been scared already. And were scared at the time because there were tensions in the 80s. Ronald Reagan and Russia and all that. But it's viewed today as a reminder of what could happen or would happen should the unthinkable ever happen. So how did the public react? Well, they saw a familiar city, Sheffield, being attacked. No dramatic music, no victorious ending, no national anthem. It was real folks that they didn't hardly know. They spoke about not being able to sleep properly for days afterwards. And now when the film ended in that silence, many people still sat round that TV, still silent for sometimes hours later. And it was talked about for weeks. And although only 6 million people watched it, which is a moderate audience for the time, it has been viewed many millions of times since 1984 when the film was made. We must remember that this was during the time, as I said, when there were tensions going on anyway. Thankfully, none of this came to pass, as we all know. And although the film was severely criticised for being too depressing, it is an important part of history from a social angle. But those who thought it was bad, an earlier film that was made about a nuclear attack in Britain called War Games in 1965, wait till you listen to this. Well, it was more of a documentary. In fact, it was that bad that the BBC decided not to show it. It was a narrated documentary, and remember, it was during the actual Cold War period that concentrated on the immediate effect of the attack, different threads which showed how society got on during and after the attack over many years. The BBC thought it was too much for the public and it would cause total panic and probably depression and misery. As you can imagine, the film became publicly known, but it was never shown. People became curious as to why they were being denied seeing it. Rumours such as the government wanted to suppress the reality and moreover the inevitability of a nuclear attack. That was not the case. It was the decision of the BBC. They watched it in full and found it too disturbing and close to reality of what people were already imagining during the height of the Cold War. The documentary itself was set like a news bulletin with reporters giving live reports as events were happening. And if you didn't realise it was fictional when it popped on that television set, you'd have thought it was real. You'd have thought it was a news flash. How scary is that? The film only ran for 46 minutes. So the Cold War, so terrifying? Or so likely as people once thought? Again, we will never know, but the question remains, did it teach us that deterrent that has kept us away from that dystopian world that many have feared? One thing is for sure, that war has not ended, but total annihilation? Well, it's not happened yet. Sleep well.